In this lesson we look at the basic properties of radiation. Initially we're going to look at the three types of radiation, alpha, beta and gamma. We need to know how they change the nucleus, which is going to be pretty important, and we need to then talk a little bit about safety. And the reason behind why we need to talk about safety is we need to have a quick look at how the three types of radiation interact with matter, and then towards the end we're just going to very quickly look at what we mean by ionizing radiation. Alpha radiation, to look at the first one, let's just look at what it is in really basic terms. Alpha decay is when a parent nucleus is unstable and it becomes stable by releasing an alpha particle. And if you look at this little animation, we can see that an alpha particle is actually 2 protons and 2 neutrons, which you may know is a helium nucleus. So this tends to occur in large heavy elements where there's lots of protons and neutrons. So this is the basic idea behind an alpha decay. If we look at a beta decay is where a neutron spontaneously decays to form a proton. So a neutron turns into a proton, and in the process it sends out what actually is a very fast moving electron, which we call a beta particle. Gamma decay is nothing to do with any changes in the nucleus. It's quite simply when a nucleus that is in a sort of an excited state, we say it's in an energetic state, sort of calms down and it releases energy in the process, and the energy that's released is known as a gamma decay, and it's gamma radiation, which is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which we looked at in core science. Look at this nucleus here is uranium. It's uranium 238 with 92 protons. If we allow it to decay, there it goes, and after it's decayed we could have a look at the decay equation, and if you think carefully, the number of protons has reduced by 2, which makes this bottom number 90, so it's lost 2 protons, and in terms of the mass number is reduced by 4. So 238 minus 4 goes to 234. So the atomic number, this number is reducing by 2, and the mass number, this number is reducing by 4. This is what we call a decay equation for alpha. If we look at a decay equation for beta decay, here is the carbon 14, which is about to decay. I think if you just follow this one here, if you just look at this neutron, here we go, this neutron turns into a proton, and in the process it released a beta particle. So if we've got a neutron turning into a proton, then the number of protons, here we've got 6 in carbon, is going to go up to 7, which makes it nitrogen, and the number of protons and neutrons together stays the same. Remember here we've got a neutron that turns into a proton, so we don't get a large mass, we have the same mass. So the mass number stays the same, but the atomic number goes up by 1. And finally, in gamma decay, here we can see our excited nucleus. So it's an energetic nucleus, and it will sort of release energy. It loses energy, and it loses it as a gamma ray. So here we go. Sends out very quickly. You might not have saw that, but there's no equation here. Nothing that happens. No change to the nucleus whatsoever. Some decay equations on the higher paper. You might get some of these mentioned that you have to complete. If we look at the alpha decay, if this particular element, which is thorium 90, that decays via an alpha decay, then we're going to lose 2 off the 90 and 4 off the 230. So there we go, which goes to radium 226 with 88 protons, and this is how we would show the alpha particle. So we can see here there's 2 protons and a mass number of 4, which is 2 protons and 2 neutrons together. With the beta decay equation, so here we have hydrogen, and if this decays via beta, then if we remember, a neutron turns into a proton, so the atomic number goes up by 1, so 1's turned to 2, but the mass number stays the same. So we've applied our ideas of an alpha decay and a beta decay in an equation. It's important to think about safety of radioactive sources in terms of handling them or transporting them, so there's lots of stuff you can read about, but in simple terms really we just need to be careful, because people or clothing or things can become contaminated. This is the key idea of radioactive sources being dangerous, and if you become contaminated it can cause problems, which we'll look at in a second. Basic safety precautions. The basic idea is you keep your exposure times as short as possible, you label things clearly, you store in shielded containers, and whenever you handle, you might have seen teachers handle radioactive materials, you handle them with tongs to make sure that you don't touch the radioactive materials. When we think about what happens when alpha, beta and gamma interact with different materials, you might have seen the experiment in the lab where we show that alpha radiation is easily stopped by paper. So on this diagram, the alpha will not get through the paper at all. Beta will pass through paper, but aluminium stops it. So you can see this line here stops aluminium. But we also showed that gamma radiation will pass easily through paper, also through aluminium, and it will actually pass through lead. It has to be very thick lead to stop it. So alpha, very, very weak, I suppose, in terms of what it will get through. But this isn't the whole story. We need to look at the idea of ionization to help us understand why alpha is still dangerous. Ionization is something that happens to cells, and alpha, beta and gamma can all ionize cells. So if we take a look at a little bit deeper into the cell, we'd have to look inside the nucleus, and inside the nucleus is the DNA, and the alpha, beta or gamma radiation can cause sort of problems when cells divide, and it can cause mutations in cells, which is errors when the DNA is copied. The biggest thing this can cause will be that it can cause cells to be cancerous, so mutations, or it can cause cancer. So it's not very nice at all. In terms of alpha particles, if you remember from the last slide, they don't actually pass through paper, so skin will stop alpha. So you might think alpha is nice and safe, but unfortunately you need to think if an alpha radioactive source got inside your body, it would be very dangerous because the alpha radiation would be inside your body, so it could quite easily damage cells. So alpha is dangerous when it's inside the body. Beta, they're not absorbed by skin as we saw previously. They'll pass through paper. Aluminium will stop them, so they will actually get inside the body. But beta particles are not as ionizing as alpha particles. So even though they can get inside your body through the skin, they're probably not as dangerous as alpha. And finally, we have gamma rays. Gamma rays we saw will pass through paper and also aluminium and also lead. So they will pass easily straight through the body. But if they do actually get absorbed, so by bone or something like that, something quite dense, then they can still cause ionization.